Is Sweetrobin, Robert Arryn, Littlefinger's son? It's one of the longest-running fan theories in A Song of Ice and Fire, but what's the evidence for it? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire in depth, as well as The Lord of the Rings, The Witcher and more. Welcome. We know Robert Arryn, Sweetrobin, as the rather coddled and sickly child of Lysa and Jon Arryn. And in neither books nor show is there any indication that anyone in-world thinks any different. But there is a long-running fan theory that he may in fact be Peter Baelish's son, rather than Jon Arryn's. The logic behind this is that Lysa and Littlefinger definitely had been lovers when they were younger. Lysa kept up that love, and Peter allowed it to continue across many years, and finally they came back together and were married. So what if they got together a bit while Lysa was married to Jon Arryn, and Sweetrobin was the result? Sweetrobin is short and not particularly well built, with brown hair, like Littlefinger, as opposed to Jon Arryn's broad shoulders and blonde hair. And if it is the case, it adds a certain bitter, horrific irony to Littlefinger's apparent dislike of the child, and willingness to at least let him die, if not outright push him in that direction. So, is it likely? Well, first let's look at the timing and a brief bit of history. Lysa became pregnant with Littlefinger's child in Riverrun in the build-up to Robert's Rebellion, in the year 282. I'm sure you know the complicated history there with Cat, but the important thing for us now is that he was then chased out of the Riverlands, and she was forced to drink tansy tea, losing the child, and was married the following year to the much older Jon Arryn, a marriage of political convenience, cementing the rebellious families together through ties of marriage. After the end of the war, Lysa was, I'm sure, briefly back in the Vale, but her new husband was made Hand of the King, and she moved to the capital with him. Apparently, to please her, Jon Arryn put Littlefinger in charge of customs in Gulltown, where he did very well. Littlefinger arrived in King's Landing in the year 289 AC. He started with a small job in customs in King's Landing, but rose quickly, and by 292 had managed to rise to Master of Coin, with a seat on the small council. During this time, Jon and Lysa remained married, and we're told that he did his duty in the bedroom, and Lysa fell pregnant several times, though only one child lived, Robert Arryn, who we know as Sweetrobin, born in the year 292 AC. So, in terms of timing, yes, theoretically this could work. Littlefinger and Lysa were both in King's Landing at the time Sweetrobin was conceived, and although Littlefinger wasn't yet a member of the small council, he was clearly known to the Hand of the King's circle, as was his childhood friendship with Lysa, so people wouldn't necessarily have been suspicious of seeing them talking or close or whatever. It would have been hard to conduct an affair there with all the spies in the Red Keep, but not impossible. But did they? Or did they just happen to be in close social circles without actually having an affair? We have no independent third-party accounts, so our best evidence is probably from Lysa herself. And this is how she talks about that time, talking to Sansa. That was hard, to see him every day and still be wed to that old, cold man. Jon did his duty in the bedchamber, but he could no more give me pleasure than he could give me children. His seed was old and weak. All my babies died, but Robert, 3 girls and 2 boys, all my sweet little babies dead. And that old man just went on and on with his stinking breath. So, you see, I have suffered too. She had suffered here by having to be married to Jon Arryn while she could still see Littlefinger. There's no hint here of sneaking away for an illicit time with Littlefinger, or of him being the father of her child, or of any other break in what she felt of as suffering and hardship. She talks of silence and whispers between them during that time, and no more. So that's what she says, and it's backed up by how she acts. When Littlefinger does finally head to the Vale to be with her, she is desperate for him. You have to read the whole passage. A few proof texts wouldn't really capture the feel, but the whole vibe here is of a woman finally getting what she has wanted and lusted after for years and not been able to have, not someone who has just been away from her lover for a while. Her unwillingness to wait a moment longer and her commitment to milk the moment for everything it was worth are quite excruciating at times, particularly for Sansa, who has to listen to her rather loud and enthusiastic sounds coming from the bedchamber all night. And probably most strikingly, we later see Lysa at her most honest and vulnerable in the last chapter of A Storm of Swords. She saw Littlefinger kissing Sansa and now is threatening to throw Sansa out of the moon door. Littlefinger intervenes, and she turns on him, almost begging, telling their life story together from her perspective, heart on her sleeve, telling her truth. We hear her from Sansa's POV. "I've always loved you. I've proved it, haven't I?" Tears ran down her aunt's puffy red face. "I gave you my maiden's gift. I would have given you a son, too, but they murdered him with moon tea, with tansy and mint and wormwood, a spoon of honey and a drop of pennyroyal. It wasn't me. I never knew. I only drank what father gave me." She's telling Littlefinger that she would have had a son with him, but was forced to lose it. That's how much she loves him. Not that they do have a son together, Robert Arryn. He is irrelevant to their story in her mind. Given all this, her affirmation of how hard it was not to be with Littlefinger at that time, her enthusiasm at finally getting the person she wants, and her saying she would have had a child with him, not that she does have a child with him, all this makes it very unlikely that Sweetrobin is Littlefinger's. Added to which, whenever she does talk about her son, she seems very clear that she blames his weakness on his father, John. His seed was old and weak, she says, hence his offspring were weak too. Let's gloss over the science on that. Lysa was far from a maester in her understanding of these things. We only care about what it reveals about what she believes, that Sweetrobin is John's son. For context here, in the show, Sweetrobin as a child doesn't seem particularly robust, but in the books it's even more so. He is small and weak for his age, and suffers from frequent seizures and shaking. Maester Coleman keeps him under regular sedation with dream wine and sweet sleep, to the extent that he's now concerned the overdosing is doing more harm than good. Which leads us, of course, to the other point here. Littlefinger has big plans for the Vale, and they clearly do not involve Sweetrobin. In explaining his plans to Sansa that she marry Harry Harding, we get this exchange. He is not Lady Waynwood's heir, he is Robert's heir. If Robert were to die... Peter arched an eyebrow. When Robert dies. Our poor, brave Sweetrobin is such a sickly boy, it is only a matter of time. When Robert dies, Harry the heir becomes Lord Harold, Defender of the Vale and Lord of the Eyrie. John Arryn's bannermen will never love me, nor our silly, shaking Robert, but they will love their young falcon. So Littlefinger expects Sweetrobin to die, and soon, and seemingly he has been encouraging Maester Coleman to give him sweet sleep for his seizures. Sweet sleep is indeed a relaxant in tiny and very occasional doses, but he's been getting more than that, and it's dangerous in larger doses. Coleman protests both times we see him told to administer it, and says Sweetrobin shouldn't take any more for half a year, but does dose him up anyway. Sweetrobin going into a long, sweet sleep seems very much on the cards, and is a pretty foolproof assassination method if you want one. Everyone knows what a sickly child he is, so death would not be a surprise. And if Littlefinger is that relaxed about the boy's death, and may even cause it, does that not suggest that he isn't his father, or at least doesn't know he is? I suppose that depends on how despicable you think he is, but probably in my view. So, although there is no smoking gun here, nothing that categorically says Sweetrobin isn't Littlefinger's son, it's hard to imagine what that evidence actually could be. And given the evidence for it isn't that strong, yes, Sweetrobin has brown hair, like Littlefinger, and John Arryn was blonde, but Lysa's father Hoster also had brown hair, and we all know people whose hair colour skipped a generation. And yes, Lysa and Littlefinger were both in King's Landing when Sweetrobin was conceived, but Lysa speaks openly about how she was still sleeping with her husband then, and how hard it was not being with Littlefinger. And of course, when she is pleading with Littlefinger, she talks of how she would have and wanted to have a child with him, but it was lost, not that a child of theirs grew up to be Lord of the Eyrie. So we will probably never know for sure, although based on what we do know, this does look like a no. And I'm okay with that. The A Song of Ice and Fire community sometimes understandably spends a lot of time focusing on whether such and such a person is actually secretly someone else's child. Jon Snow's parentage is at the centre of the whole story, as are Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen's. The idea that Tywin's children might not actually be his is also under constant debate, what with Tyrion's dreams of dragons and Cersei's echoes of the Mad King, and there are countless other examples of possibly disputed parentage, particularly going back in Targaryen history. Aegon the Conqueror's children, Rhaenyra's, Aegon IV's, these are all deliberately placed by George R.R. Martin, I'm sure, and are often key parts of the story. But not everyone can secretly be someone else's child. Simply using the same plot device over and over again would make for unimaginative storytelling, not added layers, in my view at least. And of all the examples I just cited, this is the one with the least evidence, foreshadowing, or literary satisfaction if it is true. We already know what Littlefinger is like, and the idea that he might kill his own child without knowing it doesn't really affect our view of him as readers all that much, or if he ever found out the truth, would it perhaps even affect him deeply? No, as fun a theory as this one is, unless we get some new evidence in the Winds of Winter, personally I'm going to file it under probably not. If you'd like to see more videos like this, diving deep into George R.R. Martin's world of Ice and Fire, there's a link to my playlist on the left of your screen now. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.